Why does La Jolla want independence? Why do they want to break away from San Diego? Why do they want to secede? And I think apparently this has been going on for a very long time. Apparently, La Jolla has gone through multiple iterations of trying to break away. And on one level, you kind of makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of wealth, obviously, in La Jolla. There's a lot of tourist attractions in La Jolla. La Jolla is very different than a lot of the other communities in San Diego. And I would imagine that a lot of the movers and shakers in La Jolla, a lot of the old money in La Jolla, probably take a lot of pride in being La Jollans and therefore want to have their own city. So they're not mixed up with the riffraff of the rest of San Diego. I'm sure that's a driving reason. I haven't heard someone articulate it that way. You know, of course, they're trying to spin it by saying, oh, it's actually better for San Diego that we break apart. I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, the property tax income from La Jolla has got to be enormous. But you know, I'd imagine also that the people in La Jolla want to be able to have greater control over their local community and their local resources and public facilities. So that makes sense on that level. But I think we're going to learn more about it. Now, the story is that this effort, this time, they're a lot more organized. And this is more than just kind of fleeting talk, that there's actually a serious effort in La Jolla to do this. What do I think? You know, I have sort of mixed feelings about it. You know, of course, this podcast is all about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And frankly, if you're declaring independence, that's liberty, you know? So on one level, I kind of like this idea of La Jolla breaking away and becoming their own thing, because then they'll have, like I said, more control over what happens in their city. Now, here I live in the city of Poway, and Poway is its own legit city, and it has a city council, and we have local officials that can make decisions about what goes on in Poway. And that's powerful. I mean, Poway was unincorporated and became a city in 1980. But our neighbors next door in Rancho Bernardo and our other neighbors in Rancho Penasquitos, they're part of San Diego. And they do not have direct control over their neighborhoods. They have a lot of committees, advisory committees, and planning boards, and they ultimately make recommendations to the city of San Diego. And then the city of San Diego makes the decisions. And a lot of times their wants, needs, and desires are not listened to. Well, frankly, that happens in a city where you have representation, like here in Poway. There are a lot of people that argue the same thing. Their wants, needs, and desires are not being listened to either. But it does make sense at that level that you want to be able to have local control. I get that. I mean, frankly, that's why the United States was created, is to have self-rule and to have independence from England. And so we can manage our own affairs on this side of the Atlantic. So how does this work? I mean, how do you declare independence? I mean, they don't have a civil war. You know, you don't just plant a flag and say we're independent. There's a process for this. And apparently, a formal proposal has to be submitted to the San Diego Local Agency Formation Commission, which helps communities become incorporated. And that petition supporting incorporation has to be signed by at least 25% of the local registered voters. So they've got to get 25% of the people in La Jolla to agree to this, just to have it considered. Okay, that kind of makes sense. I mean, you don't want to have like a 2% of La Jolla, you know, basically speaking for the other 98 and getting this secession. You want to have a significant mass, a critical mass of people that want to support this. And this is just to get it to be officially considered. Then it has to go to an organization called LAFCO, LAFCO. And I wish I would have written down what those initials are for. But apparently this is a California commission that they've created a process for cities to break away. So there's a standardized methodology of doing it. So they have to approve it. And then this is the key part here that I think is pretty tricky, is that the public in La Jolla have to have a majority vote to secede, which, you would expect. But the majority of San Diego also has to vote to let La Jolla leave. So, and apparently that's always the sticking point that, this LAFCO regulatory body that sort of manages these things. Apparently there hasn't been any secessions in the last 40 years in California since they set up this process, mostly because the bigger, older city doesn't want to vote to let the little guy break away. I mean, the little guy wants to break away. They could probably get the votes, but the big city doesn't. And honestly, I don't think San Diego, if they had their druthers, would vote to let La Jolla go. Because they know there's so much tax revenue that comes from La Jolla, I mean, property tax specifically. And, I mean, people take pride in La Jolla as being part of San Diego as well. I mean, heck, I live in Poway and I like to visit La Jolla from time to time, and it is truly a remarkable location. Not a city. It's not a city yet. But will that happen? I can see La Jollans voting to secede, but can you see San Diegans voting to allow it to happen? See, I don't. I think that's going to be a very difficult ask.